I was fired for correcting the CEO's daughter's expensive mistake. 2 days later, 77 clients followed me. I walked away smiling while their phones rang nonstop with furious clients. Let me start from the beginning. When the elevator doors slid open on the 38th floor of Mason Ridge Partners, I stepped out into that all-too-familiar blend of polished wood and the ever-present aroma of stale, burnt coffee. Along the corridor, tall windows stretched from ceiling to floor, framing the view of Pine Lake under a soft mid-morning Oregon mist. The ferries below looked like they were in a hurry, slicing through the water as if they had somewhere urgent to be. I'd gotten in before the rest of the team, like always, and took my spot at my desk with my third, oversized cup of coffee already half gone. Today was our big Q3 pitch, one of those mornings where a single mistake in the numbers could cost the company millions. I fired up my laptop and opened the final version of the slide deck I'd been obsessively tweaking until well past midnight. Every line item, every projection, every tiny detail had been double-checked. I skimmed through the revenue chart again, whispering a quiet mental checklist to make sure it all held together. 7 years I'd put into this job, and somehow mornings like this still had me breathing tight. Then, out of nowhere, a new email pinged onto my screen. Subject line, confidential, revised Q3 deck. It was from Kyra Langston, the CEO's daughter, who had just been handed a shiny title, Executive Project Director, barely 6 months after her college graduation. I hesitated before opening it. Something about it didn't sit right. But I clicked anyway. My stomach dropped instantly. On slide 18, the projected cost for our campaign with Halstead Systems had been changed from $6.9 million to $69 million. One misplaced decimal point, and suddenly we were sitting on a potential disaster. If that version went in front of the board or the client, we wouldn't just be embarrassed, we'd be facing lawsuits or worse. By the time I walked into the glass-walled conference room, it was already starting to fill. Jared Monroe from Halstead was scrolling through his phone, while Zoe Cole from Cole & Klein lightly tapped her manicured nails on the table. The skyline outside glittered faintly in the windows, but all I could focus on was the thundering quiet inside me. Then Kyra strolled in, dressed head to toe in designer gear, her confidence so loud it practically echoed. "Morning, everyone," she said sweetly, like this was just another cheerful Monday. "I've made a few enhancements to the deck." Enhancements, that's what she was calling them. We moved through the slides, everything looking smooth, until we landed on that one. And there it was, 69 million, bold and unapologetic. My heart was pounding in my ears. I had two options: keep quiet, hold on to my job, or speak up and risk everything. I took a breath and kept my voice steady. "Before we go on," I said, "we need to correct a number on slide 18. The actual figure should be 6.9 million. 69 isn't realistic." Kyra's head jerked toward me, her expression blank for half a second before it flushed red. Jared's eyes slowly lifted from his screen, and Zoe raised one perfectly arched brow. In the doorway, I noticed Walker Langston, the CEO, Kyra's father, had quietly entered, arms crossed, watching everything. I pulled up my original version of the presentation and clicked to the correct slide. No one said a word, but the air turned heavy. Something had shifted in that moment, and I could feel it in my bones. The rest of the meeting played out quietly. Jared gave me a faint nod as he zipped up his laptop, and Zoe passed by me with a soft, "Appreciate that." No one else said a word. Kyra stood stiff as a statue, her jaw locked, cheeks flushed, glaring like I'd just lit a match in a dry forest. Her dad didn't say anything either. He just walked out, face unreadable, and somehow that silence hit harder than if he'd yelled. The rest of the day dragged on like a slow-moving storm. People avoided eye contact. Even Marie, my assistant, dropped her voice to a whisper when she spoke to me, like we were standing in a room full of ghosts. Walker's office door stayed shut. And I knew what that usually meant. By 5 o'clock, the place had mostly cleared out, but I stayed behind, pretending to sort papers just to avoid the inevitable. Then at 5:42, my email pinged again. Urgent. HR meeting required. I didn't need to open it to know. The walk down the hallway felt surreal, like I was moving through molasses. Olivia Scott, the head of HR, was already seated behind her desk, hands clasped, perfectly composed. Walker sat next to her, stone-faced, the light glinting off his wedding band. No sign of Kyra. She didn't need to be there. Claire, Olivia began, using my full name like a school principal would. After a thorough evaluation, we've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. She rattled off something about team dynamic issues and challenges with leadership collaboration. Leadership collaboration, funny way to describe saving the firm from a $62 million disaster. I sat tall and didn't flinch as she went over severance, benefits, and next steps. Walker only spoke once, near the end. Security will walk you out. Jake from the security team looked more uncomfortable than I felt when he showed up to escort me. In less than 10 minutes, 7 years of my work life were packed into one beat-up box, a jade plant gifted by Sophia from accounting, the goofy Queen of Numbers mug Jared gave me 2 Christmases ago. A few photos from corporate retreats where I was the one holding things together. I took one last look around, caught the blinking red light of the security camera in the corner, and I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I already knew what was coming next. And then, quietly to myself, I said, 2 days. The sun had dipped low as I drove over the Oak Ridge Bridge, and the city glowed golden, like it was holding its breath. My stomach twisted with nerves, sure, but deeper than that was something steady and sharp. A calm resolve I hadn't felt in years. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the outlines of a plan were already forming. Everything felt different the moment I stepped inside. Like my own life had been swapped out for someone else's. The living room was dark except for the scattered lights from downtown reflecting off the river just outside my window. The hum of the city kept going. And so would I. I set the cardboard box down gently on the living room floor and sank into my old, familiar couch, letting the stillness settle around me like a thick blanket. For a long minute, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at that little jade plant I somehow managed to save from the office purge. Funny how it already seemed to belong here more than I did. I reached over to the side drawer, pulled it open, and took out a small black USB drive I'd tucked away months ago, not because I planned to use it, but because something in me knew I might need it. It felt light in my hand, barely there, but the weight of what it held was anything but. 7 years of my life lived on that drive. Detailed notes. Encrypted renewal schedules. Client campaign strategies. Not just names and numbers, but memories and trust, tiny pieces of the human connections that went beyond contracts. I had notes about Tessa's daughter getting a scholarship to Columbia, Jared's quiet panic during his wife's chemo, and how I adjusted timelines without making him ask. There was Zoe's Thanksgiving breakdown when her launch almost crashed, and I stayed on the call with her for 3 hours while my own dinner went cold. That flash drive held every win, every rescue, every earned ounce of trust. Mason Ridge had hired me to handle accounts. I'd ended up building loyalty instead. The silence broke when my phone buzzed. Lucas Quinn's name lit up the screen, my oldest friend, and thankfully my lawyer. I heard, he said without even a hello. So you already know why I'm calling. We went through my non-compete clause together, word for word, like we were defusing a bomb. His voice was calm and deliberate, like a surgeon. You can't reach out to clients, he reminded me, but there's nothing saying they can't reach out to you. You have every right to exist, Claire. Just exist loudly enough for them to notice. After we hung up, I just leaned back, staring at the ceiling while a strange mix of fear and excitement swirled in my chest. If I pushed too hard, too fast, I could lose everything. But for the first time since they shoved me out, I felt something steady flicker to life inside me. Control. Real control. I copied everything from the drive into tidy folders on my laptop, every click feeling like one more brick in the foundation I was laying. The lights of the river blinked outside my window, steady and quiet, like they were keeping rhythm with my heartbeat. This wasn't just information, it was leverage. Not the kind you flash around, but the kind you keep sharp and hidden, waiting. By the time I shut my laptop, I already had the next move lined up in my head. The next morning, I woke before the sun, and there it was, my little black flash drive, still sitting on the nightstand like a silent witness. The city outside was hushed, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing. I poured a strong mug of coffee and sat down with my laptop again. My finger hovered over the start a post box on LinkedIn for a long time. Then slowly I typed. After 7 fulfilling years with Mason Ridge Partners, I've made the decision to begin a new chapter. I'm grateful beyond words for the relationships I've built and the trust I've been given. I'm excited to explore what's next. Clean. Respectful. No drama, no names. But anyone who knew this industry would catch the subtext immediately. I hit post and leaned back, heart pounding. It didn't take long. At first, it was just the usual polite thumbs-up reactions from former coworkers. But then the direct messages started rolling in. Wait, what happened? Are you okay? Tell me this isn't final. Then came the more strategic ones. If you're available, we need to talk. Zoe Cole's message popped up before I'd even finished my second cup of coffee. Let's connect soon. I have something in mind. I didn't reply just yet. Lucas's voice echoed in my mind, don't chase, just be visible. But I couldn't help the little smile that tugged at my mouth. By mid-morning, my post had made the rounds across nearly every B2B circle I'd ever been part of. My name was being passed along in quiet curiosity, shared in comment threads and forwarded emails, the kind of buzz no press release could buy. Somewhere in her trendy, high-glass corner office, Kyra Langston was probably feeling real proud of herself, assuming her shiny new team was in place and her little optimization had gone unnoticed. What she didn't realize was that she had just launched me into the spotlight, the most in-demand, unattached strategist on the West Coast. I closed my laptop and looked out at the river again, watching one of the ferries slice across the water. My mom's voice came back to me soft, but powerful from just last month, when we got the news her scans were finally clear. Claire, don't ever let someone else tell you what you're worth. You've already made it through worse. She had survived cancer. I had survived betrayal. And now? Now, I would create something entirely mine. The messages kept coming. Dozens. Then hundreds. Each one was its own quiet promise that the bonds I'd built weren't going anywhere. And as I silenced my phone, one thing was already crystal clear. The whispers were only just getting started. The morning after my LinkedIn post took off, I signed a short-term lease for a small co-working spot in the Eastwood district. The building was this quirky blend of old red brick and updated glass, filled with startup folks and freelancers glued to their laptops in communal lounges that smelled like espresso beans and ambition. My little space wasn't much, just a rented desk by a window with a view of a graffiti mural and a pile of onboarding paperwork, but it felt clean, untouched, and mine. A place with no ghosts from Harlan and Boone's sleek glass offices. I was midway through setting up my laptop when an email popped up and froze me cold. Subject line, cease and desist, immediate action required. The letter from their legal team was a performance piece if I'd ever seen one, full of stern legalese about unauthorized interference, non-compete violations, and threats of legal consequences if I dared continue. My hands went ice cold. This was how companies like Harlan and Boone kept people in check, not with chains, but with carefully manufactured fear. For a second, it worked. My confidence cracked. I'd spent my entire professional life in this city, and if Harlan and Boone painted me as the problem, every firm would hear their version first. I looked around my bare little corner of an office, where the only thing sitting on the desk was the black USB drive, part charm, part silent leverage. I called Lucas. My voice was quieter than usual. He didn't interrupt, just listened, steady and patient. When I finished reading the email out loud, he exhaled through the phone and said calmly, "They're bluffing. You haven't broken your agreement. You didn't chase anyone down. They came to you. Fear's the only card they've got left, Claire. Don't play it for them." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark on my sofa, lights off, just holding the flash drive in my palm. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried every version of the life I could lose or win. I imagined the headlines, the worst-case outcomes, the best case too. All of it swirled like a storm. Finally, I set it back on the table, exhaled, and accepted something quietly but fully. I was standing on a threshold I could never step back from. And even with all the nerves, there was a flicker of courage under the doubt, just enough to light the way. By sunrise, I was ready to test how far that little spark could take me. I met Ethan Lane at Riverside Grind, a tucked-away coffee spot near Bayview that always felt like it ran on a hush. No music, no chatter, just the hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of mugs. I chose a corner table facing the door, nerves buzzing under my skin, and rehearsed polite, professional phrases in my head. Ethan arrived looking exactly like a man who hadn't slept, a little rumpled, tie loosened, shoulders tense. He slid into the seat across from me and didn't waste a breath on small talk. "She missed the renewal," he said, his voice low, clipped. "You know what that means?" I nodded slowly. The contract with Orbis Tech was one of the biggest on Harlan and Boone's books. Missing the renewal deadline meant they had no binding agreement, no safety net. "She didn't even know the date," he went on, dragging a tired hand over his jaw. "We could pull out tomorrow and your CEO wouldn't notice until billing came back rejected." I let the silence breathe between us for a second. Then I reached into my bag and slid a slim folder across the table. "For your records," I said carefully. "Just a copy of the last terms we agreed on." Ethan opened it, scanned the top page, and I saw the tension start to leave his shoulders. "You saved me." Again, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then he looked up. "Claire, if you were independent, we'd rather work with you than keep dealing with this circus." His words hit me like a jolt of electricity, equal parts thrilling and terrifying. That wasn't just a compliment. It was a door cracking open. I took a sip of coffee to hide the smile that was creeping up. "I'm just figuring things out right now," I said with a light laugh. "But thank you." We talked shop after that about upcoming trends, leadership shifts, and the quiet unraveling that was happening back at Harlan and Boone. Every offhand comment he made reminded me that I hadn't lost my influence. I'd just left the building. When we finally stood to leave, Ethan shook my hand like he meant it. "Keep me in the loop," he said. And I knew those words carried more weight than any signed deal. I stepped outside into the cool Bayview air, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something real ignite in my chest, like I was finally moving toward something instead of running from it. By the third morning, my workspace in Eastwood didn't feel like a hideout anymore. It felt like a command post. I walked in early, hot coffee in hand, and opened my laptop to a calendar stacked with meetings. Day 3 was where this storm I'd set into motion was either going to fizzle or explode. The first video call was with Zoe Cole. Her face popped onto the screen framed by the glass and white decor of her home office, always polished, always on point. "We're done," she said flatly. "I've already sent the termination notice to Harlan and Boone." I let out a slow breath. Zoe had been one of our highest profile clients. Her exit would send tremors through the industry. Next came a group video call organized by Tina from Crosswell Global. My screen lit up with 9 familiar faces, all clients I'd worked with over the years. Everyone started talking at once, a mix of confusion, frustration, and fed-up energy. "She called us Crosspoint Systems," Tina said first, rubbing her temple. In the same email where she pitched a retainer increase. Another exec, Bryce, shook his head. "We're done babysitting this." The avalanche was gaining speed, and I hadn't said a single word yet. She ended up leaking one of our confidential project briefs straight to a rival firm. Then someone on the call muttered, almost in disbelief, that she'd used Comic Sans on a proposal meant for high-profile clients. I just sat there, nodded when I needed to, but kept my mouth shut. I didn't have to pitch myself anymore. Brianna was doing that for me by blowing it, one mistake after another. Then came a curveball I hadn't seen coming. Right there during our strategy call, I glanced at my feed and saw the headline Silvermark had promoted Brianna to Vice President of Client Strategy. I blinked at the screen, and the reaction from the folks on the call wasn't quiet. Some laughed. Others were downright furious. "That's it," Ethan snapped, his voice slicing through the chaos. "They've completely lost it." When the call finally ended, I had already marked 34 clients with stars on my private spreadsheet, each one quietly confirming they were ready to walk away. And with every little star, it hit me again. The influence I'd held all these years was never really Silvermark's. It had always come from the trust one built. As the sky darkened and the sun dipped behind the Seattle skyline, I leaned back and let it sink in. Everything was tipping, domino by domino, and I could already hear the next one about to fall. The next morning, that slow unraveling turned into something much louder. My phone was buzzing nonstop. The first message I opened was from Danny, a freelancer I used to bring in for big projects. "Have you seen this?" she asked, followed by a screenshot. It was a leaked internal email from Victor Hartwell himself, Silvermark's founder and Brianna's father, already spreading like wildfire across LinkedIn. In the message, Victor wrote to the board that family loyalty must come first, and claimed that my reaction had humiliated his daughter. Someone had even paired the email with an audio clip from an internal leadership meeting where he blatantly said Brianna would grow into the role no matter what it costs. Within hours, the whole industry had latched onto it. People started calling it the Hartwell collapse. On LinkedIn and X, which used to be Twitter, the jokes were relentless. Memes of decimal errors and screenshots of Comic Sans proposals flooded feeds under the hashtag #Sias Hartwell collapse. Competitor agencies circled like vultures, dropping cryptic posts aimed at companies looking for stability. Meanwhile, my inbox kept filling with direct messages from clients. They were confirming what I already knew deep down: they were pulling out. By sundown, my spreadsheet had grown to 77 stars. That meant 77 clients had left. In just 2 days, nearly 45% of Silvermark's revenue had disappeared. That evening, my screen lit up with a call from Victor Hartwell. I let it ring twice before picking up. His voice shook with anger. "You planned this," he said tightly. I kept my voice calm. "I didn't plan anything, Victor. I just existed." And the silence that followed was thick. I could almost hear him trying to calculate the damage, picturing the boardroom, the panic, the financial wreckage. "You've torched every bridge," he finally said. But the weight in his voice was gone. It was just noise now. I exhaled. "Maybe," I said gently. "Or maybe I just stopped letting you walk all over mine." After I hung up, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. I could feel the victory under my skin, humming like a live wire, but mixed in was a heaviness, the kind that comes with knowing something is truly over. Still, as the night settled in, I could feel it, that next step taking shape, solid and inevitable, waiting for me to move. 1 week later, I unlocked the door to a bright little office tucked above some boutique shops in downtown Seattle. The walls were bare, the furniture a mix of shiny new desks and thrifted chairs, but the space felt more alive than Silvermark ever did. Marlowe's Strategies was no longer just an idea in my notebook. It was real. Layla and Corey were already there, laptops open, coffee cups next to half-scribbled drafts. The energy they brought with them buzzed through the room, fresh, focused, unburdened by politics. It wasn't just about having clients, it was about having the right ones, people who genuinely trusted us. Quality over quantity wasn't just a feel-good slogan. It was how we'd survive and thrive. News kept trickling in from the outside. Victor had finally been pushed to resign by the board, and Brianna? She was quietly removed from her role. Her LinkedIn now just said, "Exploring new opportunities." I didn't feel smug. Just finished. That afternoon, the three of us crowded into the tiny kitchen with paper cups and a bottle of champagne. I lifted mine and looked at them. "We don't just win," I said. "We build what no one can take from us." The words settled into the room like something solid. For the first time since I walked out of Silvermark with nothing but a cardboard box, I didn't feel weighed down. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I was finally building something real, something that belonged to me, built on trust, not fear. We spent the rest of the day working through campaign ideas, mapping out strategies, and letting the sound of the city drift up through the open windows. Every word we shared, every step we planned, felt like another brick in the foundation of something that couldn't be stolen or shattered. And as the sun dipped low and poured gold across our little office, I knew we were just getting started. There was a strange, quiet peace settling in me, one I hadn't known before. This wasn't about revenge anymore. That part had burned out long ago. What I felt now was something deeper, renewal, the beginning of something truer. And I could sense the final piece of that transformation waiting for me, just past a door I hadn't yet opened. Months rolled by, and the rain returned to Seattle, tracing delicate silver threads down the windows of my new office, like it was blessing the place. Marlowe's Strategies wasn't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. We'd grown into a real agency, tight-knit but unshakable. And that morning, I signed a long-term deal with a national brand that would carry us for years. As I pressed my pen to the signature line, a wave of calm washed over me, one no promotion or headline could have delivered. It was the calm of knowing I'd built something with my own two hands, something no one could take away. Then came a knock on the door. I looked up and there she was. Brielle Hawthorne. But not the woman I once knew. Gone were the sharp heels and smug grin. She wore jeans, a plain coat, and eyes that held no fire, only exhaustion. "I'm not here for a job," she said before I could even react. "The board sent me to offer a formal settlement. They want to close this cleanly." She paused, glancing at the floor. "But I also came for something else. Advice." I just looked at her. The younger me would have felt a rush of satisfaction, maybe even victory. But now, I felt detached. Not cold, just clear. Life had already taught her the lesson she never wanted to hear from me. I gestured toward the cafe across the street. "One coffee," I said, "that's all I've got for you today." We sat by the window, the city beyond us blurred by rain, like a painting still drying. She asked me questions. Real ones. How I built trust no title could command. How I found the nerve to speak up, even when it meant losing everything. I gave her the truth, plain and simple. No dramatics. No venom. Just the facts. She jotted a few things down in a worn notebook, her fingers trembling slightly. And when it was over, we parted without ceremony. Back in my office, I watched the ferries glide across Elliott Bay, the city wrapped in gray and light, and I felt the last threads of my old life loosen. I didn't need their apologies or recognition. The truth was, power had never lived in glass towers or fancy job titles. It had always lived in the trust one carried, with my team, with my clients, and with myself. That trust followed me, not the other way around. I turned back to my desk, the ink on the contract fully dried, and knew without question, this story was mine now. Fully mine. No one else's name on the page.